If you had stood beside Napoleon in Egypt, let me pull you into a moment that still feels unreal, even when you know how it ends. Picture yourself on a crowded French deck in 1798, looking east across a sea that seems calm only because it hasn't decided to kill you yet. Behind you, Europe, familiar seasons, predictable roads. Ahead, Egypt, heat that doesn't forgive, a river that dictates life, deserts that erase footprints in minutes, and cities whose towers cut the sky like needles. If you were there with me, you'd realize very quickly that this wasn't a normal campaign. It was an invasion wrapped around an experiment. Cannon and musket were only half the cargo. The other half was curiosity. Engineers, astronomers, linguists, artists, surveyors, men carrying telescopes and measuring chains, specimen jars and notebooks, as if an empire could be built with numbers and drawings as much as with bayonets. And at the center of it all stood Napoleon Bonaparte, young, intense, impatient with delays, obsessed with speed and control. He didn't speak about Egypt as a distant land to visit. He spoke about it like a hinge in world history, a place that could threaten British trade routes, reshape the Mediterranean, and resurrect the grandeur of antiquity under a modern flag. But here's what I want you to feel before we begin. Egypt is not a stage. It is a force. The Nile is not scenery. It is infrastructure, economy, and survival in liquid form. The desert is not emptiness. It is an enemy that attacks your lungs, your skin, your morale, your logistics. And the cities, Alexandria, Cairo, are not trophies. They are living systems that respond to occupation the way a body responds to infection. So listen as if you're walking beside me. I'll show you the coastline where we landed, the dunes that swallowed men whole, the geometry of infantry squares when cavalry came like a storm, the glow of naval gunfire at night when the sea turned against us. I'll tell you what you would have smelled in Cairo's alleys after a riot, what thirst does to discipline, and what it felt like to realize we were stranded, victorious on land, but cut off by water. This is what it would have been like if you and I had gone with Napoleon to Egypt. Channel note. Quick. If you're into documentary style, you are there storytelling, subscribe to the channel, and like this video. It's the simplest way to help me keep making deeper episodes. And if you want the next campaign and the next chapter, we genuinely need your support. Chapter 1. The Voyage and the Landing. Toulon, Malta, Alexandria. If you had joined the expedition in the spring of 1798, the first thing you'd notice is that everything smells like preparation. Rope fibers, tar, wet timber, sweat, horse dung, and anxiety. The French ports are loud with loading, barrels of water, sacks of flour, crates of ammunition, spare muskets, field tools, medical supplies. Horses go aboard, half panicked, blindfolded so they don't fight the gangplanks. Officers talk in clipped sentences, pretending certainty is the same thing as safety. Out at sea, the Mediterranean feels too open, too exposed. You'd learn to read the horizon like a threat. The British fleet is the nightmare in everyone's mind, because this whole campaign depends on landing before the Royal Navy finds us. Days blur into a rhythm of salt spray and cramped sleep. Below deck, the air turns stale and warm. Men cough, gamble, argue, pray. The scholars, those men of science, are there too, carefully guarding fragile instruments from the same waves that are slamming cannons into their lashings. Then Malta appears, rising from the water like a stone crown. It isn't just a stop. It's a strategic hinge. a fortified island positioned to control routes through the central Mediterranean. From the deck, you'd see walls layered over walls, bastions angled to break cannon shot, watchtowers cutting sharp silhouettes. Yet the takeover happens faster than you'd expect because fortresses aren't only stone, they are politics, morale, leadership, and the will to resist. When those weaken, a wall is just a wall. After Malta, the air subtly changes as we sail east. It dries. The wind carries dust instead of moisture. The light looks harsher, almost metallic, and the sea has that brilliant blue that feels like a trap because it's so beautiful you forget it can be fatal. When Egypt finally comes into view, Alexandria doesn't greet you with the grand image you've built in your head. It looks low and pale against the sand, a coastal city shaped by wind and survival more than by romance. The landing is confusion wrapped in discipline. Boats scrape the shallows. Men jump into waist-deep water trying to keep powder dry, muskets raised like fragile offerings. Boots fill with sand instantly. The sun hits you like a weight on your shoulders, and you realize your body has entered a different set of rules. Alexandria's streets are narrow and practical. There's fighting, yes, short, sharp, close range, doorways, corners, rooftops, echoing shots that sound larger than they are because stone amplifies everything. The city is taken quickly because speed is Napoleon's obsession. He knows that a slow siege invites disaster, especially with Britain somewhere out there on the sea. But the victory has a taste you don't expect. Dust. You're not celebrating. You're swallowing grit and trying to find water that won't make you sick. And that is your first lesson of Egypt. Even when you win, the land charges a fee. From Alexandria, marching inland, you begin to understand Egypt's geography as a living map of constraints. The Nile Delta is a patchwork of cultivated green, canals, ditches, and fields clustered around water like life around oxygen. Beyond that, desert. Not cinematic desert, functional desert. Hard ground, scrub, glare, and distances that stretch until they mess with your sense of time. The army moves like a machine that must be fed constantly. Water becomes obsession. Wells are not conveniences, they are targets. Villages become supply points and friction points at the same time. If you were beside me, you'd see how quickly soldiers stop talking about glory and start talking about bread, shoes, and the next reliable source of water. And the scholars? They're measuring even as we march. You'd see them noting the angles of canals, the layout of villages, the types of crops, the way buildings are oriented to catch or block wind. They sketch, they record, they argue about inscriptions and ruins. To them, Egypt is a book. To the army, Egypt is a furnace. Some nights, camping under a sky that looks too full of stars, you would hear two different kinds of conversation drifting through the camp. Soldiers whispering about British ships, about sickness, about whether this campaign is genius or madness. Scholars murmuring about ancient stones, about the shape of the land, about the possibility of understanding a civilization by mapping it. And somewhere in the middle, Napoleon pacing, thinking, pushing everything forward. By the time you approach the routes leading toward Cairo, you would feel it in your bones. Egypt is not going to be conquered by bravery alone. It will be decided by geography, supply, speed, and the ability to keep moving when your body begs you to stop. Chapter 2. The March to Cairo, the Battle of the Pyramids, and the Nile's Shadow. If you marched with us toward Cairo in the summer of 1798, you'd learn the texture of heat. It isn't just warmth, it's pressure. It presses down on your helmet, your shoulders, your thoughts. Sweat doesn't cool you the way it does in Europe. It evaporates too quickly, leaving salt on your skin like a second stinging layer. The Nile becomes the central fact of your world. When you're near it, you see why Egypt can support cities, water channels feeding crops, boats moving supplies, villages clustered where the floodplain can be worked. But when you're away from it, you understand the cruelty of the boundary. Step too far from the river's influence, and the land becomes indifferent. The desert doesn't fight you, it simply refuses to help you live. Then you meet the Mamelukes, Egypt's elite cavalry power tied to a warrior tradition that values speed, personal skill, and shock. If you picture cavalry as neat lines, erase that. These horsemen move like a living storm. Bright clothing, curved sabers, pistols, banners, horses trained for sudden turns and fearless charges. They don't just want to defeat you, they want to break you. Napoleon's answer is not romance, it is geometry. He forms the infantry into squares, disciplined blocks of men, multiple ranks deep, bayonets outward, muskets ready, officers inside, ammunition protected. An infantry square is a portable fortress, and it exists for one purpose: to survive cavalry. When the battle comes, what history later calls the Battle of the Pyramids, you would feel terror and admiration at the same time. The Mamelukes charge, and for a moment it looks like nothing can stop them. Hooves hammer the earth. Dust rises so thick it turns the horizon into a smear. The sound is not one sound, but many. Shouting, horses screaming, musket fire cracking, officers yelling commands to hold steady, and the squares hold. Volley after volley erupts from disciplined lines. Smoke rolls out, white and heavy, clinging in the hot air. The cavalry slam into a wall of steel and lead and have to peel away, reform, charge again. It becomes a contest between raw speed and organized fire. If you were next to me, you would notice how your mind changes in that moment. You stop thinking about individuals and start thinking about shapes, angles, distances, timing, because the battle is being decided by formation as much as by courage. And then, beyond the smoke, the pyramids sit in the distance. Here's the truth no movie gets quite right. They don't feel like a theatrical backdrop. They feel like witnesses, massive, patient, indifferent. They make your entire life, your uniform, your weapon, your ambition, feel temporary. You'd feel a chill, not from cold, but from scale. Empires have risen and vanished here, and the stones remain. After the battle, Cairo draws closer, and the mood shifts from battlefield intensity to occupation tension. Cairo is not simply a capital. It's a dense organism of neighborhoods, markets, mosques, courtyards, workshops, and alleyways that can swallow an army's movement if the city decides to resist. You'd notice verticality, minarets, domes, balconies, wooden lattice screens. You'd smell everything at once: spices, smoke, animals, sewage, baked bread, sweat, river water. Napoleon tries to rule with a mixture of intimidation and performance. He issues proclamations, framed to sound respectful, attempting to present himself not as a destroyer, but as a new kind of ruler. But occupation is never just language. It is taxes, requisitions, patrols, courts, punishments, and the daily friction of foreigners carrying weapons through local streets. And this is where the campaign's strangest dual nature becomes most visible. While soldiers establish posts and guard routes, the scholars build an intellectual infrastructure. They create institutions, gather samples, measure monuments, document everything from plants to ancient inscriptions. You might see an engineer studying irrigation systems while a street away, soldiers drill in a courtyard. You might watch an artist sketch a mosque facade while guards stand tense at the entrance. If you were there, you'd feel a complicated emotion, a genuine awe at Cairo's life and history, and a hard awareness that we are holding it by force. The city watches us, the city adapts, and beneath the surface, the city waits. Chapter 3. The sea turns against us, the Battle of the Nile, Cairo's uprising, and life under occupation. The expedition's heartbeat was always the fleet. Without control of the sea, Egypt becomes a trap. Supplies uncertain, reinforcements delayed, communication fragile, and in early August 1798, that trap snaps shut. If you were near the coast around Aboukir Bay, you might have seen flashes on the horizon after dark, light that didn't belong to lightning. That was naval gunfire. Admiral Nelson had found the French fleet. A night naval battle is a different kind of fear than anything on land. On land, you can run, take cover, disappear behind terrain. At sea, the ship is your world. When broadsides fire, the deck shudders under your feet. Smoke makes it hard to breathe. Fire is a living enemy that climbs ropes and eats sails. Wood splinters become shrapnel. Men drown, not because they can't swim, but because their clothes and wounds turn water into a weight. The Battle of the Nile is more than a defeat. It is isolation made real. After that night, everything feels different. Cairo is in our hands, but Europe might as well be on another planet. You'd feel it as a tightening in the chest. The knowledge that victory on land doesn't matter if the sea denies you continuity. The campaign becomes a locked room story. The door has slammed. Now you must survive inside. Occupation pressure rises, taxes, grain requisitions, and the daily presence of armed foreigners grind against the city's nerves. Rumors spread faster than facts, and in an occupied city, rumors are fuel. When revolt breaks out in Cairo later in 1798, it isn't a single event. It is the city transforming. You would hear the sound of it before you see it. Distant shouting, then the sharp crack of gunfire, then a rolling wave of movement through narrow streets. Cairo's geography matters here in a way that maps can't fully convey. Alleyways twist, rooftops connect, crowds can form, vanish, and reform behind stone walls. Mosques become rallying points not only because they are sacred, but because they are central and recognizable, anchors in the urban maze. If you were with me, you'd see how an uprising forces an army into a new posture. Soldiers stop moving like conquerors and start moving like intruders. Cautious, compressed, scanning rooftops and windows, protecting supply routes, trying to isolate pockets of resistance. Artillery in a city becomes both a tactic and a message. When guns fire into dense neighborhoods, it isn't just about targets. It's about dominance. Stone broken to break will. The suppression is harsh, and the aftermath is heavier than the battle itself. Because once a city has erupted, it doesn't forget. Even when the streets fall quiet, tension remains in the air like smoke trapped between buildings. And through all of this, the scholars continue, almost obsessively. This is the part that would stay with you. This surreal overlap of fear and measurement. In the same days that soldiers patrol and punish, men of science catalog Egypt's world. The Nile's flood patterns, agricultural cycles, the architecture of mosques, the remnants of ancient temples. They draw maps with a precision that feels like control in ink. They collect inscriptions, artifacts, and notes that will later reshape Europe's understanding of Egypt. You might travel to the Delta and feel the environment change again. Cooler breezes near water, flatter horizons, canals like veins, palms, and cultivated fields making a thin green argument against the surrounding aridity. Coastal towns like Rosetta, Rashid gain importance because, after the naval defeat, the coastline becomes both vulnerability and opportunity. In that context of fortifications and military engineering, the discovery that later becomes famous occurs in 1799, an inscribed stone found during work on defenses. If you had been there, you wouldn't know the future significance immediately. You'd just see scholars suddenly behaving like men who found a missing key. Lines of script, careful rubbings, urgent discussions. Even trapped by war, the expedition is extracting something lasting from the land. So, you'd feel two truths at once. First, the occupation is becoming more precarious with every month. Second, the expedition is producing knowledge that might outlive the soldiers who are sweating and bleeding to protect it. Chapter 4. Sinai to Syria and back, Jaffa, Acre, Aboukir, and the moment Napoleon leaves. Eventually, the campaign lunges north toward Syria because Egypt cannot be held if a larger Ottoman force gathers beyond its borders. Napoleon chooses to strike outward, an offensive meant to prevent invasion, to seize initiative, and to build a defensive buffer by expanding the war. If you marched with me across the Sinai approaches, you'd remember the desert not as a view, but as work. Sand grinds into everything. Weapon mechanisms, boots, eyes, bandages. The wind feels like it carries needles. Water becomes a mathematical problem. How much remains? How far to the next source? How many men can be kept functional? How many will drop no matter what you do? The route forces you to respect geography. Oases and wells become strategic points. Towns are not just towns, they're supply nodes. You learn that a campaign is not one long battle. It is a chain of movement, feeding, resting, and pushing forward again. Then Gaza, then Jaffa. Here the story turns morally dark, because real campaigns do not stay clean. After Jaffa falls, prisoners are killed in large numbers, an act justified by some as necessity and condemned by others as cruelty. If you were there, you would not experience it as an abstract debate. You would feel it as a shift in the atmosphere of the army, the sensation that a line has been crossed, and even if the campaign continues, something inside you has changed. Disease follows. The plague spreads among exhausted troops. Hospitals become places of dread, not healing. You would smell sweat, vinegar, and despair. You would hear coughing that sounds too deep, too final. And you would learn the blunt truth that history books often soften. Sickness can decide strategy. When men can't march, victories become meaningless. Acre is the wall we cannot break. If you stood beside me outside Acre's fortifications, you would understand why sieges are the most grinding form of warfare. The city sits with its defenses and defenders, and you sit with your trenches, your guns, your patience, and your casualties. You need heavy artillery, stable supply lines, and time. Yet time itself becomes the enemy, because every day outside the walls consumes men, morale, and momentum. Acre's defense is strengthened by external support and by the cruel logic of the sea. Britain's naval presence matters again, cutting our supply advantages and helping the defenders resist. Assaults fail. Trenches creep forward, measured in meters bought with blood. Each attempt is met by stone, fire, and stubborn resistance that does not collapse the way Napoleon needs it to. When the retreat comes, It doesn't feel like a simple withdrawal. It feels like being released from a grip, except you leave part of yourself behind. Men return thinner, eyes look duller, conversations become shorter. The desert on the way back feels even harsher, because now you know what failure tastes like. Back in Egypt, the war snaps into focus again around Aboukir, this time a land battle. Ottoman forces land, hoping to establish a foothold. Napoleon reacts with speed and concentrated force, striking hard before the landing can turn into a stable front. The fighting is decisive, the kind of victory that restores confidence for a moment and convinces you that maybe, just maybe, the campaign can still be saved. And then comes the moment that would feel most personal if you were there. Napoleon leaves. He doesn't leave like a king with ceremonies and trumpets. He leaves with calculation and urgency, slipping away toward France when the sea offers a narrow opening. He frames it as duty, as necessity. Some see ambition. Some feel abandoned. What you would feel is the reality of it. The man who shaped the campaign's rhythm is gone, and you are still here, inside Egypt's heat, inside its politics, inside a war that no longer has a clear path home. The occupation continues under other commanders, but the strategic problem remains. The British control the sea, and that control slowly tightens like a rope. Over time, French forces are pressured, negotiated against, and eventually compelled to surrender and evacuate. Militarily, the campaign fails to hold Egypt permanently, but the legacy does not end with evacuation. If you were there, you'd understand something unsettling. A campaign can fail in its stated goals and still reshape the world. The maps, studies, drawings, and collected knowledge, the systematic attempt to document Egypt, feeds Europe's imagination and scholarship for generations. Egypt becomes not only a territory in a war, but a subject of intense study and desire. The expedition's violence and its curiosity travel together into the future, inseparable. So, when you look back on it, when you remember the smell of the Nile at night, the dust on your teeth near Giza, the echo of gunfire in Cairo's alleys, the hopeless patience outside Acre, you realize the story isn't only about Napoleon. It's about what happens when a modern army collides with an ancient landscape and tries to turn geography, history, and people into an extension of its will. And if you had been there with me, you would have come away with one final truth. Egypt does not belong to the invader's story. The invader belongs to Egypt's. Closing reminder: if you want more episodes like this, more campaigns told like you were standing inside them, subscribe to the channel and like the video. It helps more than you think, and it's what makes the next chapter possible.